Hey, joining us now, he's got a spring in his step. He's got to be fired up. The deputy Democratic leader of the House of Delegates, House member from the 43rd District, Northern Virginia, Mark Sickles. Hey, Mark, great to have you, man.
Good morning, John.
Hey, you got to be fired up, right? Every vote matters. Shelley Simons yesterday winning the recount over David Yancey in Newport News, right? District 33,
94,
giving the Democrats
94.
a 50-50 tie, right?
Yes,
Unbelievable.
Sir. Yes, sir. Ready to go to work.
One vote. Mark, think about this, right? So not only did one person's vote decide that race, but it decided control of the Virginia House of Delegates. Can you imagine that, Mark? One vote.
Yeah, well, we got one more to go. It may not be the last one, John. I mean, people are motivated to go out. They don't like what's going on in the country. If I was just listening to your description of what's going to happen with this tax bill, if that were true, you'd be in good shape if that's what happens. But people don't feel that way, and we've got a lot of problems, and health care is the number one issue for them. They don't want us to turn down our tax money we've been sending to Washington and not bringing back, and up almost $11 billion at this point that we've turned away that we paid in taxes. And so I think those things, and just having a government that runs well, that's administered well, and I think that's why they're looking toward us.
Well, look, you guys kicked butt in the Virginia race. So let's get to this other race in Fredericksburg, Mark Sickles. What is going on with that? Explain that to us.
Well, there's an 82-vote margin that will be addressed in the recount. That could get closer, obviously, or it could expand, either way. And then there is a lawsuit pending that the voters have filed.
Laura, you've made a number of personal endorsements of
voters that were given the wrong ballot. Ironically, both candidates in the neighboring districts, their last name was Cole, C-O-L-E. And one of them is a heavily Democratic district represented by Mark Cole, and the other one is Fredericksburg City in a Democratic area. And 147 people were given the wrong ballot. There's an 82-vote margin, and that margin could shrink in the recount. So Judge T.S. Elliott's going to hear the case on January 5th.
So what happens? So just walk us through what happens here. So the judge hears the case. So, I mean, they can't declare another winner because they can't assume you would have voted for your Democratic candidate, right?
What we're asking for, the plaintiffs are asking for, is a redo of the election,
right?
And so that's what's coming up. The Rob Thomas, the Republican candidate, has been certified, and that was done by our Board of Elections under the instruction from our Attorney General. I think the code is unclear on that. I think we should go and look at that, about forcing a electoral board to certify a vote that they can't. To me, certification means, yes, this is correct. I looked at the number. It's like an audit. That's not what certification means in the election sense, because the electoral board could not do that, but they were forced to certify.
All right, so they certify it. You've got a lawsuit, Mark Sickles, and so what you're saying is 147 people that went to vote in the House of Delegates race, they had the wrong candidates on their ballot, right?
Correct. That's correct.
So, and that's a fact, right? That's not a maybe.
A fact.
That's a fact.
It's hard to know how many are on which side. You don't know where they are, but they were. That's a fact that they voted in the wrong district.
Right. So they voted in their right precinct, but the ballot they got to fill out in other words, they voted in the right polling place, but depending on what precinct they lived in, their ballot might have been not the ballot they should have gotten, right?
It was likely a split precinct. We have a couple hundred of those across the Commonwealth, and it's probably in one of those precincts where there's two delegates that cover the area, cover the precinct, and you just have to make sure you're in the right one. But it was an error that was made before Election Day. People were assigned these by the registrar of the districts wrongly way before Election Day.
Right. They actually screwed this up in 2015 also, right? And they never fixed it.
I don't recall, but sometimes I wonder, with how little money we put into these elections, and they're run by localities, it's an unfunded mandate. We don't even pay for it at the state level. Sometimes I wonder why there are not more accidents.
So, Mark, when the judge looks at it, there's really two choices. He's either going to go ahead and go with the certification and you got a 50-50 tie, or he's going to say, you know what, no, there's 147 people that couldn't really participate in this election. They voted in the wrong one. The only way to do that is have a re-election. And if you do that, the Democrats are going to win that 2-1. There's just,
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah,
everybody's focused now. I mean, there was a little bit of surprise factor on November 7th. It would be a campaign of national significance, obviously, and a lot of people, a lot of money, resources go into it. So I'm not sure what the outcome would be, but it would be a fair way to decide the winner for sure.
When will that decision be made?
I'm not sure how long he'll take to decide after he hears the case. Probably not long at all, because the judge knows that whoever loses is going to appeal to the Fourth Circuit.
Right.
And that's where it'll be decided. So.
Right. But this is going to be after.
Everyone knows we go into session on January 10th, and this is going to be heard on January 5th. So there's not a lot of time. That's where we are.
All right, so walk us through the options. So it's heard on the 5th. If the judge rules in favor of a new election, that means that Bob Thomas would not be certified and he would not be seated.
Don't know about that. I'm not sure about that. That it probably would vote if he found this was unfair.
Right.
That he probably would vote to decertify them, we would have to start without that seat.
So if you start without that seat,
the thing is, there will be an emergency appeal to the Fourth Circuit.
Right.
But then how fast you can have the election, everyone knows who the candidates are now in that district. It's gotten a lot of attention.
Right.
So you could have an election fairly quickly, but probably not before the 10th.
You guys convene on the 10th. If Bob Thomas, the Republican, by the way, this is for the seat of the retired Bill Howell in Fredericksburg. So if Bob Thomas is not seated, then the Democrats have a 50-49 majority, and you'll be able to take control of all the committees and elect your own speaker, right?
Only theoretically. I would not personally suggest any type of power play there. I think that we need to work on a power sharing agreement probably now and set the terms of how we're going to proceed in the next little bit. I mean, the last time we had power sharing, the agreement was to last until one side reached 53 votes. And so there's things that we can do that would make the operation of the House fairer to both sides when we're in a tie situation like this. And at some point, we can negotiate that. I don't know what point, seeing that we have this litigation going on, but it's going to be interesting.
So walk us so that we understand the power sharing. So, Mark, what would a power sharing agreement look like potentially in the House?
I don't know what ours will look like. We have studied the last one that was done about 18 years ago, and they shared the running of the committees. They did not split up. You get this committee, I get that committee. As a matter of fact, I was an aide to Delegate Gladys Keating during one of those years, and she was co-chair of the Corporation Insurance and Bank Committee, which is now Commerce and Labor. And so I watched some of those committee meetings, and they weren't exactly run like a Swiss watch. So there's some downsides to it, having two chair. You could flip a coin in many cases on who's going to chair one year, who's going to chair the second year of the General Assembly sessions. There's all those things are going to have to be worked out. I mean, it's a model, but it is not anything set in stone.
Mark, who would be the speaker?
Well, that's a $64 million question, John. I mean, that the speaker and the speaker's powers need to be negotiated. I mean, it's less important who the speaker is than what the speaker is able to do. From a power perspective, we would like to have always wanted to appoint members to the committees ourselves and not the speaker of the opposite party. We would be willing to give the Republicans the same ability. I mean, I think most people don't even know that we don't work like in across the river here. The speaker appoints people to committees of both parties, and that would be something that would definitely be on the list to discuss. So it's a whole mix of things, John, on how we get to go.
So could the speaker be, right, so now the two leaders, right, you've got Kirk Cox, the Republican speaker in waiting. That's not going to, maybe, but not a done deal. David Toscano was your minority leader. Could either of those be speaker under a shared power agreement, or do you see someone not in that level of leadership?
Yeah, I don't know yet. I can see it, sure, but I don't know if that's the answer. Maybe someone coming from outside to preside over the chamber.
I thought it said in the rules that
of neither party.
Does the speaker
right
have
now,
to be a member?
Our speaker votes. Unlike the Speaker of the House of the United States,
right,
who doesn't vote except in rare situations.
Right.
Our speaker votes on every bill, and we don't have a tiebreaker like the Senate does. And so, you could negotiate something like that, but I don't think that's likely.
And
to have somebody preside and make the procedural calls and kind of do what Susan Shar does in the Senate.
By rule, does the speaker have to be a member of the House, or can it be somebody from the outside?
I don't think so. I could be wrong on that.
So you guys could potentially install a compromise candidate from the outside, somebody like Chris Saxman or something like that, right? Somebody totally from the outside.
Or some accomplished woman like Eva Tig Hardy.
Yep,
sure. Someone who knows our state really well.
Or former Governor Wilder, right? It could be any of them. That's possible. Yeah. But I doubt it. I think it'll come from the inside. Okay, I've got a minute and a half. I want to get to Medicaid expansion, okay? I was not for it. Now I am, because we went through the Obama thing. The federal government, regardless of what they do with Obama, they're going to continue to fund it. Sean Connaughton on my show yesterday, Sean said that the VHHA, the Virginia Hospital and Health Association, would fund the 10% of the cost of Medicaid expansion that wouldn't come from the federal government when they get to the 90% level. So they said the hospitals will kick in the 10%. That means there's no risk to Virginia, zero, zilch, nada. So what would be the argument now not to go forward with Medicaid expansion when we've already seen that even with Republicans in control, and even if they repeal Obamacare, in every bill they had, the Medicaid expansion funding was guaranteed in perpetuity, including conservative states like Arkansas and Indiana.
They're going to give us a across the board set of money and say go to it, and where it's going to be based on what we had historically, block grant.
Can you pass it?
I think we can pass it. Now, what Sean was talking about is a bill I hope would pass, but we don't necessarily need that. And the problem we have now is a practical one. The CMS, Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, as part of HHS in D.C., they're not really approving any Medicaid waiver programs from around the country. There's several states that are trying to change theirs, and the Trump administration doesn't really want to help the program work better. So it's kind of a black hole. So I think we need to proceed in a dual track process where we just submit what's called a state plan amendment to accept Medicaid expansion, and then design our own program that fits Virginia separately, and then send that up to get it approved. In the Obama administration, they approved a lot of innovative ways to spend the money, in particular, using money to buy insurance for poor people in exchange. You have to get approval to do things like that. But if we ask for that now, similar to the Arkansas program, for instance, if we were to ask for that now, we wouldn't get an answer anytime soon. And the budget that was just introduced on Monday assumes that we start collecting the Medicaid expansion dollars in October. And there's a lot of will be replaced. When we do that, we're going to get over $200 million plus on our side because we're trading money that we spend now for mental health, for instance, where we get 50% from the feds, 50% from our Virginia tax dollars. We'll be going from that to 93% money for a few years as it winds down to 90%. So, I mean, it's a really good deal. That's how we're going to be able to improve our healthcare system for veterans and people with mental illness. And, you know, we're trying to do better at mental illness, and we have lots of problems we're trying to solve, particularly where they live. And we need supportive housing, and we need services in the community to keep them out of hospitals. We got 200 people reportedly in our mental hospitals in Virginia that should not be there if they had the supports in the community to live in the community, and that's where we need to head. And we can do that a much better job if we accept the money that we've been paying into the feds.
All right, we're out of time. I want to thank House of Delegates member Mark Sickles for being with us today. He's also the deputy director in the Democratic House Caucus, which now sits at a 50-50 power-sharing tie with the Republicans, and the General Assembly will convene on January the 10th. You can follow Mark Sickles on Twitter, at Mark Sickles VA, at Mark Sickles VA. Mark, always a pleasure to have you on Enlightening Conversation today. Thanks for all the updates, man.
Okay, keep me in touch with all this good news that's coming.
All right, bud, you got it.
Okay.